What's up guys, my name is JDCut5 and welcome back to another F1 My Team episode. We are going to be racing in the Netherlands, but before we do that we need a few things that we need to do, obviously with the activities, and there's going to be a season break also, so prepare for the upgrades for different things like that and be able to get them in, and with a kind of bit more time being able to complete it, and hopefully going into that race we are able to have a few better parts. We need to upgrade the components on the engine also due to a lot of wear. Obviously we don't want to have it where we break down in the race and cause problems on that side. We're looking at doing a few more upgrades in terms of personnel. Again, we do another one, and this is for the analysis suite. And then we also get a choice at a rivalry. I should have gone with Sergio Perez, but unfortunately for whatever reason I chose Max Verstappen. I know we're going to be losing out a lot of time to him, but we will give it our all. Durability upgrade being made, as we haven't looked at that and we haven't focused much on that sort of sector. And then we get straight into things. As I say, if you weren't aware what we do in this kind of series in terms of how we relay the weekend, we have it where we have our practice programs. We get on with that initially to get them used to the track, get some points on the way in terms of the claim and the budget and everything else, and obviously the more laps the better. And then we go into the qualifying where we do like I think it's like a 15 to 20 minute session of qualifying, and then it's either, depending on which circuit it is, we'll have a sprint or a main race. In terms of this circuit, it is not one of my favourites, I'm going to have to say. Something that I really struggle with, and so many tricky corners in this Grand Prix. I have adjusted the setup, don't get me wrong, so I have adjusted my car to what this circuit is, but with it not being one of my stronger points, I feel like I was really lacking in a lot of fields. I did actually struggle at times in terms of the actual programs itself, and it shows. I really couldn't get to grips with the circuit. The car itself, I think it was reacting well to what I wanted it to do, but I feel like in fine margins of the actual track I just wasn't kind of executing certain points correctly, and I feel like I was lacking. Even if it was a couple of hundreds of seconds, I wasn't able to really do much. So we do the practice sessions in the end, and we do have a good practice, don't get me wrong. P3 isn't bad whatsoever. Obviously it could be much worse, but yeah, and unfortunately for ourselves, for whatever reason, Felipe Massa only did the hards and seemed to kind of fall back to the last place on the grid for practice. Going into qualifying now, we are hopeful that we can provide something. I'm hoping for at least a top 10 kind of starting point on the grid and then shifting from there. Luckily for us, we seem to always do a first good lap, and it didn't seem to be actually that was the case this time round. With myself struggling in practice, I felt like I had to do a few qualifying laps. Even with a worse kind of battery, I saw the areas that I needed to be improving in, and as you can see, the first lap only got me to P19, so it could have been a really miserable Grand Prix for us if we weren't able to do anything at this kind of point and get a faster lap. Max Verstappen being the fastest at the moment and currently sitting on pole, and that would be on his home Grand Prix also, so definitely good for him. But as we complete and we go round this circuit, you can see on the Delta that we are kind of getting faster, don't get me wrong, so there is improvement being made. Only 5 minutes left of the session also, as we look to see if we can improve on our first lap and hopefully make our way up the grid. Half a second now gained on our previous lap also, so improvement definitely being made as we go into the final few corners. This bit I really struggled to get on the power and have enough execution for where we can come out the exit and have a really strong amount of power and precision. As we go around the final corner, going around the bend that looks kind of sort of NASCAR-esque, we seem to get a decent exit, and the Delta is going up from there, only providing ourselves with a decent kind of finish, and we do end up in P8, and I'm going to take that for what it was. I'm not too sure where I was going to fall at one point, if I was going to go further down. We do in the end P12, probably one of the worst qualifying positions that we've actually been in across the whole of this series, especially with the way that we are at the moment and what we have been doing previously. I mean, we have actually been fighting for podiums and victory, so very unlikely, but as I say, it's not a best circuit for me.
We're 25 miles away from Amsterdam for today's Dutch Grand Prix. It's a race the great Jim Clark won on 4 occasions, leading for an astonishing total of 370 laps. Zandvoort Circuit has 14 corners, 10 to the right and 4 to the left, with plenty of steep camber and elevation changes to keep our drivers on their toes throughout the 2.6-mile lap. It's time to take a look at our starting grid for today's race. George Russell will begin today's event in pole position, with Charles Leclerc alongside. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Hamilton, Verstappen, Sainz, Perez, Norris, Bottas, Ocon, Fernando Alonso, Stroll, Cook, Albon, Joe, Gasly, Massa, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Oscar Piastri, Sargent, De Vries and Yuki Tsunoda. And now it's time to head down to the track. And joining me again for the race today, Natalie Pinkham. Now, can I get your take on Max Verstappen? That was a solid result in the last race. Can they keep that momentum going this weekend?
It's always nice to come into a Grand Prix weekend on a high, but your expectations are based much more on your practice and qualifying runs. So it's the momentum from those sessions that they'll be hoping to carry into the race today.
Okay, we've got that relief of having points on the board finally, so let's keep that form up and get another top 10 finish today, please.
So here we are then, we're on the grid, it's P12, we're waiting for these lights out to go, and we are all up to full revs and lights out, and away we go. Lance Stroll just to the left of us with Fernando Alonso, his teammate, just in front, also battling with Esteban Ocon. Not many room for error in terms of where we can go, and we do go past Lance Stroll, but we have to slot into P11. Not the best of starts and not a lot of positions gained, and this could look very bleak for us as we try to see and go on the attack against the Alpine of Esteban Ocon as we go round the corner wheel to wheel, and so do other many drivers. Unfortunately for us, Esteban Ocon just cuts in front of us, and we do collide initially, and then putting the ERS off for the moment and hoping to stay with this sort of field and hopefully maintain a few positions. But as you can see, I'm actually struggling to keep the position from Lance Stroll and going back into my original qualifying position with Esteban Ocon just in front. But there is a big group. You've got Bottas there, you've got Alonso there, another few drivers. I think you've got a few Ferraris there with some McLarens. You've got Sergio Perez there also, so there's some big drivers there, so it'll be interesting to see if we can actually make any move. If you're not aware also, the weather report is rain as we do a double overtake. Lovely stuff going through there, and actually puts us up to P9, so we are in the points. Lovely overtake and really clean at the same time, and as you can see, the raindrops are hitting on the screen, so I don't think it's going to be as yet where we are going to pit. Vehicle condition looking good, and we're going to keep an eye on the weather report also, just to see when it is best suited for the tyres. The rain's going to get harder, as the engineer says, but we're not fast because we're through on Fernando Alonso also, and we're up to P8 with Sergio Perez just in front. Carlos Sainz on the harder tyre. He's going to regret that, especially as he knows he's got a pit soon, so that's an unfortunate one for him. But we're going to try and gain some time on Sergio Perez of the Red Bull and see if we can get any closer. Obviously the grip is going to start to go, there's going to be no DRS activated, and it's going to be a matter of time from where we think it is going to be viable to pit. Even though in the rain we are in sector 1, we have actually got a purple sector and we're pushing out of the lot. We are actually looking very, very good, in all honesty. As much as we were struggling, we're actually looking in a decent position as we close up on the back of Sergio Perez. I'm only going to worry though that this rain is going to hinder our performance and we're going to sit in one position for a long time. Time will tell though, as we see Sergio Perez just in front of us, and we look to see if we can gain any time on him whatsoever. We're going to go on the right hand side, we're going to go late on into the brakes, and we're going to pass through, and we are up into P7. Brilliant stuff as we slide literally there, and I think it is time to go on to the intermediate tyre. In all honesty, I actually know it's a bit hard to tell. I'm trying to get as much update from the engineers as possible, and no one is actually going in on the wetter tyre, so it's going to be another lap of this as Sergio Perez looks to see if he can overtake me on the straight. DRS enabled regardless of the rain. As he takes a look, I actually get pushed wide and I try to hold my line, but I can't, and Sergio Perez is through and he is back into his original position of 7th place. DRS being enabled, but a weird one because this rain is coming down thick and fast. Definitely slowing down the cars as we look to try and see if we can gain any more information. At least another 10 minutes of this, and this is definitely going to wet the track up, and I don't think the dries are going to last any longer from what they're saying. I think it's only a matter of time before they mention to go on the wetter set of tyres. Fernando Alonso just behind, 200ths of a second, just splits us and the Aston Martin, with Valtteri Bottas in the last point place in 10th. as we look to try and see now. I think it's going to be time for intermediates, and it is time to change them on there also, just to make sure for when we do go on the pit stop that they don't put me on a dry tyre of the medium, which would have been my original tyre if it were to stay dry, as we complete the few final corners. And as you can see just in front of me, Sergio Perez kicking up some sort of a spray now, and we are going very slow. And as I say, I feel like the wet is going to hinder us massively as we look to now see if we can get onto the pits just kind of in one piece more than anything. I'm hoping we don't go into the pits and sliding about as we go round the corner, and I pretty much think that everyone is going to be into the pits, double stacking and everything as we go into the pits. And oh, what has happened there? So we've actually collided into the wall, and that has now stopped us. And as you can see, the people that were originally behind us are now in front, and that is definitely not worked in our favour whatsoever. And it looks like to be that we're getting P11 as we go to pit on the intermediate tyre. Really unfortunate, but it's got to be done as we go onto the inters now and look to see if we can gain any time. Massive double stacking also. He slots in a few places behind us, and we are going to be in P13. So Hamilton just in front also. So this is going to be very interesting, to say the least, where we actually come out on and what kind of unfolds for this race more than anything. I don't feel like I'm going to be fast on this track whatsoever now. I feel like if it were to stay dry, then it would have helped me much more. But I've never been fast in the wet in terms of on these games. And especially with a track that I cannot get used to, I'm definitely struggling. As you can see, I go wide there, and Esteban Ocon is now taking a look, and the Alpine completely buzzes past me. Previously in the few first laps that we actually had on display, you saw ourselves going past the Alpine machine and getting absolute loads of speed on him. But unfortunately, with it being wet, I just don't seem to be able to gain any sort of time on the people in front. And now we're actually going to have to worry about Oscar Piastri, that's just behind in 1.3 seconds, as he looks to kind of see if he can gain any time with Pierre Gasly getting that space with Valtteri Bottas in 12th. Esteban Ocon 5 laps in front, and as you can see, we've skipped a fair few laps in all honesty, but this is me for pretty much most of the race as we look to see if we can just solidify a point that is in probably not the best position that we have been in compared to previous laps. A real unfortunate event where we were actually looking fairly good in the dry. We made a good start. Sergio Perez wasn't that far in front whatsoever, but as soon as the rain started, unfortunately for us, it's going to turn out to be a really uneventful Grand Prix. And as you can see, we're just struggling to get around corners. There's no grip whatsoever. We're pushing the tyres to the complete maximum with the rain coming down. And in all honesty, I'm actually surprised it didn't go onto wets, because you can barely see anything. Visibility is a big problem, and we can't do anything in this Grand Prix. Lap 19 to 25, so there's not many laps whatsoever. And as you can see just in front, there's no gain on Esteban Ocon. There's no time to say if we are able to kind of get in front and do anything in this Grand Prix. I mean, we were in no position whatsoever. The pit stop didn't help, don't get me wrong, that was a real problem. And I was kind of hoping that the weather might kind of draw out a little bit quicker, but unfortunately it seems to be that it's actually going to dry out when we are near to the end of the race pretty much. There's going to be no other pit stop to go on to dries or anything like that. We are on this tyre and we are running it to the ground, and there is going to be a point where it actually will come up with a symbol to say that the tyres are overheating and they are down to the most minimum they can possibly be. As we look to try and see if we can gain a little bit of time on Esteban Ocon, at least trying to get into P9. Hamilton's 15 seconds in front. He's got the fastest lap and he's in P8. That goes to show how weird that is also. But yeah, I think if we can gain time on Esteban Ocon at least and get into P9, then that might do us a favour. But a caution in Sector 3, something's going to happen. Will this change the matter of this race as we wait to see what has happened in this Dutch Grand Prix? Resume racing as we go further in the sectors, and Pierre Gasly just behind me is out of the session. A mechanical failure, and the first one in this race. With only about 6 laps left, unfortunately Pierre Gasly has to pull to one side, not causing any problems whatsoever, only some yellow flags. And yeah, it was unfortunate. I was hoping for a safety car to be able to bunch us all up and go from there. You just never know. And unfortunately for us, it only caused a VSC, which is a virtual safety car, reducing our pace to a minimum and only keeping at the time that we are literally within from the people in front of us. So there's going to be no time gained whatsoever, which is a bit unfortunate. It was one of those where I thought like a safety car could be unrolled, but they felt like a virtual would be the safest option and not needed for a full-blown safety car. But I think the safety car would have definitely hotted the last 5 laps up, as I say, and that would have been interesting, but not to be. And I don't think this Grand Prix is the one for us either, in all honesty. I feel like this is going to hinder our kind of rhythm and everything else, as we have to slow down to reduce our delta, trying to match it so we don't get a penalty whatsoever and go even further down the pecking order. as we look to see before it comes to an end, hoping that it will do soon, because I really hate the virtual ones. In honesty, they are such a pain trying to maintain Delta. It is a pain, but it is ending, and we are back underway, and we are racing. Return to racing speed, and away we go for the second time in this Dutch Grand Prix. We are gaining some time on Esteban Ocon, funny enough, as it's lap 21 of 25. That's now coming to an end, and as you can see, a yellow flag is mentioned from the engineer. Someone has gone off ahead of me, so that'll be interesting to see what has happened. And as you can see, Esteban Ocon is going to go past Fernando Alonso, and so am I. As we weave out the way and nearly collide with the Spaniard, we go past, and he waits to rejoin the track. I think his car's in one piece as we look to see what's actually happened. He's gone round the corner, and he's gone really wide, and where he's gone onto the gravel, the back tyres have not locked like that whatsoever. They've locked up, and unfortunately for him, he spins, and as you can see where we go past him, we nearly collide, having to swerve out the way, and that could have been really dangerous for us also, as that could have made a collision for us. As you can see, we're going left to right there, but we are in P9 then, so it looks to be that we are actually going to get more points than we initially thought, where we was only going to be in P10. Fernando Alonso gifting us that place as he makes a really big mistake, and he was actually running a decent Grand Prix. He was in front of Hamilton. I'm not too sure who else he was in front of, but yeah, an unfortunate one for the man in the Aston Martin, and we look to try and see if we can kind of gain any time on Esteban Ocon. As you can see, we're pushing the car really hard, but unfortunately, with that being said, we are going onto the gravel and the grass verges, losing a lot of time. Doing that literally any hundredths of a second. If you can lose 3-4 hundredths of a second within that time when you're going around the corners like that, and it doesn't help the kind of progress that you would like to make on your fellow opposition. Esteban Ocon now making a decent gap, but as you can see, we're going to go on to the last lap, and we have gained some more time on him. Only a second, and if only we had DRS and it was in a dry race, we would probably have a better kind of chance of gaining any time on Esteban Ocon. But it is lap 25 of 25 as we look to come to an end of this Grand Prix. I don't think we're going to get past Esteban Ocon. A respectable B9 with what's happened, a very odd pit stop where I seem to go into the wall when it kind of respawned me back on as the people went past. And then it was just a factor of the rain that really didn't help us. So really kind of shaky weekend. Qualifying 12th wasn't our best option, not going to lie. I feel like we have had better qualifyings over the season, and that was definitely one where we kind of get put down to reality. And at the end of the day, this isn't a car that's developed. This isn't a car where it can be competing every week, week in, week out. We don't even have the teammate for that, let alone what I can do in this car. But it's going to take time. And as you can see, George Russell going over the finish line, and that is a win for the Mercedes. A really good Grand Prix from George Russell, and a very different winner for once as well. So that is nice to see at least. As we look to complete the final few corners, and as we go round the track, it's been a bleak one, don't get me wrong, a miserable one with the wet weather, but unfortunately that was to be, and we look to go and cross the line in P9. Luckily Fernando Alonso was able to make a mistake, and he hasn't gained any time on us whatsoever. The tyres are completely shot, they're completely bald spotted on every area, and then we go and we see the checkered flag being waved, and that is the Dutch Grand Prix finished, and I'm happy to see the back of it, in all honesty. A really disappointing Grand Prix, and it was a very miserable one to drive in. Not the most fun, in all honesty, but it is what it is. Driver of the day going to Oscar Piastri. He's won a good Grand Prix this time round, and that was a decent one from Oscar. As we now look at the table, as you can see, so we haven't lost any points. Obviously we haven't really gained any either, with the fellow kind of competitors being very far ahead, and especially in the constructors also. An unfortunate events, and hopefully we can gain some more kind of points in the other rounds. I feel like there is definitely improvement to be made. Felipe Massa finishing in 18th, not the best, and our teammates are just shocking this year, to say the least. So looking at what actually Grand Prix that we've competed in, that was probably up to where our worst standard. I mean, the worst place that we've ever finished in 12th. So in that sort of line, especially where we had a 4th, we had a 3rd, we had a 5th, we had a 1st, a 4th, and then back down to 9th, unfortunately. But it is what it is, and we look to go further on back in Italy. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Please like and subscribe for more content just like this one, and don't forget to hit the notification button so you never miss a video. Cheers.